ESBR Boxing. Delighted to be joined by Elliott Greg, and we are back. New year, same faces though. Me and Elliott on weekly previews, and first one of the year. Here we are. We're talking about the fight in Las Vegas. It was originally meant to be for the interim WBA World Super Lightweight title, but I believe that is no longer on the line. However, the fight still goes ahead. We are talking about Britain's Ohara Davis as he faces Ismael Barroso, and yeah, in a compelling a 140-pound super lightweight contest. First big one of the year. Obviously, January is normally a kind of slow month in boxing, and it probably, with all due respect, it really is in January this year as well, barring obviously Artur Beterbiev and Callum Smith, which we'll look at next week. Um, but yeah, no, this is a fight of note, of course. So I think it's a co-main event to another big fight, which has just slipped my mind. But yeah, Ohara Davis, a lot of British interest. I think divisive character definitely a few years ago. But Elliot, as we like to do now, I want to wish you firstly, I want to wish you happy New Year and hope you had a good Christmas. But we're gonna go straight in like we do now. No beating around the bush, no looking at records and stuff. I just want to ask you, after you've told me how you are, will Ohara Davis ever become world champion?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the New Year wishes. Wishing you a happy New Year as well, and obviously everyone that's watching. It feels a bit in some ways superficial of you to and clever of you to wish me a happy New Year and throw the body shot in with the first question that you opened up with. But what do I think to Ohara Davis? I'm a fan of Ohara Davis actually. I think he's had a obviously since the Taylor loss has had obviously a bit of a rebuild, and he's not necessarily fought guys that are too high up, and even though it's been for WBC international super lightweight titles and things of that nature, not necessarily been, to be honest with you, to my mind, up at that world level. But to be honest with you, he's a likable guy, and he's obviously worked very hard to come back to where he is and to be in contention for the titles as he is. Is Barroso the toughest of his career? Hard Cattle and Taylor. Taylor was obviously the hardest, I think, especially where Taylor kind of was on that beginning of his super run that he had. Catterall for me is a difficult one because Catterall, I can almost feel like style wise is all wrong for Ohara Davis, isn't he? Like kind of slick puncher mover as well, but not necessarily carrying the sort of danger power wise that Barroso has. I actually think Barroso is a really tough, really strong challenge for Ohara Davis here. The fights he's obviously been in over his career. I mean, he's 40 years old, so he's not necessarily, especially down at that weight, it tends to be 100 years old. But I think this is a really tough challenge. So I probably would say actually in some ways presents to my mind, actually probably more of a challenge in some ways than Jack Catterall, even though I think the style of the fight will be different. But I think Barroso, we saw him last time out against Romero, got that dodgy stoppage, didn't he? In a fight that he was more than competitive in. So I actually think Ohara Davis has got problems here. I don't know about predictions, but I think this is a very tough opponent. I'd possibly have him above Jack Catterall, but behind Josh Taylor. What about yourself?
Very interesting, mate. You've kind of, you've answered more or less. So you've shot ahead there. You've shot ahead of me. You're so eager to get 2024 off to the bright start. You've gone on to the Catterall Taylor question that I was going to pose to you afterwards. But yeah, no, mate. Honestly, I think what you said there about the fact that yeah, look at Barroso. Yes, he's 40, but he's been there and done it. Someone notable. He's former world champion. And as you correctly said, and I completely agree with you, mate. The Rolly Romero fight was so dodgy. There was some jiggery pokery going on that night. There was, yeah, we need to get into it, but like that screamed corruption that night. To be honest with you, um, but yeah, I think that outside of what you've said about Catterall and Taylor, I'm going to disagree slightly. I do have Barroso behind the two of them. Um, Interestingly, obviously you had Jock Taylor as the best, in the toughest test of his career, and I do agree with that. I do agree with that. I have Catterall as the toughest, the second toughest, even though a lot of people think Catterall beat Taylor, but it's all about styles make fights and all that cliche in boxing. But yeah, I make Ismael Barroso possibly the third toughest test of Ohara Davis' career on paper. You could obviously say like I know it was a kind of on the slide, we'll say Lewis Ritson, but that's still a name for Ohara Davis. A lot of people actually thought Lewis Ritson would win that fight. Ohara Davis looked brilliant, looked $1 million. But yeah, I think that Barroso's definitely up there as one of the toughest, definitely top five toughest fights of his career, arguably top three as well. So I do agree with you in that respect. I'll throw it back to the next question, mate. And do you think that? Ohara Davis has what it takes, potentially become world champion. Say he wins this fight against Barroso. The 2024 or maybe 2025 be the year Ohara Davis gets a world title belt around his waist.
Tough question because my heart wants. I'd love to see Ohara Davis as world champion. I truly would. But I look down at that division. I look down at the names that are in that division and the possible fighters he'd have to go through to get a world title, and I just can't see it mentally. I can't see it, to be honest with you. If I analyze it, I mean, you look at some of the champions down there. Obviously, Tio Lopez. Would I back Ohara Davis to beat him? Absolutely no, I would not. Then obviously you throw in likes of Devin Haney, obviously coming up, and the victory that he had recently over Reggie Prograis, very impressive in that fight. Do I think Ohara Davis would beat Devin Haney? No, I do not. Um, Someone like Matthias. Do I think he beat someone like Matthias? Probably not either, to be perfectly honest with you. So I looked down, and then to be honest, Rolly Romero, out of the sort of guys that champions down in that division, is someone that I'd love to see chin, and I'd love to see Ohara Davis get to him. But equally, if it came down to it in a prediction, I'd say that's probably the closest fight, the closest chance, but I wouldn't necessarily bank on it either. And then if you throw the likes of Prograis, obviously, in as well, who's still competing out the division. Even if you throw in someone the likes of Josh Taylor, who's going to be calling out everyone, so Haney, whoever else is down in that division for a kind of super fight, I wouldn't back Davis to beat Josh Taylor again, even though the Josh Taylor is kind of quite diminished compared to potentially what he was in that super run. So really, for me, not with the current breed of sort of champions. Even if you fought Jack Catterall, obviously he's lost Jack Catterall, so no, I wouldn't necessarily put him there either. So for me, there's just too many people ahead of him, frankly, and there's too many sort of big fights to be made down in that weight and down in that division that I almost feel like even for him to get a proper world title shot would be some level of negotiation. I personally don't see it, man. It hurts me to say that because, like I said, I'm a big fan of Ohara Davis, but I personally can't see it. What about yourself?
Yeah, mate, I think you've kind of said everything I want to say as well. I think if he is to become world champion, I don't see it being against, I don't think he's going to beat the likes of the names you mentioned there, Teo Lopez, even if Josh Taylor's still there and they fought again, no. Catterall again, no. Um, Gray, if he still goes on, no, probably not. Even though he looked lackluster against Devin Haney, but that's Devin Haney we're talking about. Um, the only one, and I do agree with you, is see the Rolly Romero one. I give Ohara Davis a massive chance there. I actually do. And obviously he's the regular WBA champion. And this was meant to be for the interim title. So you'd think that Ohara Davis will have a good ranking if he was to win this with the WBA. So that fight could make sense next, late spring or around maybe April, May time, if or even early summer, depending on what Rolly Romero wants to do. But I make Ohara Davis live. That's a winnable fight in my opinion against Rolly Romero. So do you know what? To answer the question, I don't know will he ever become, but I think he could if he fights Rolly Romero. Because I don't rate him at all, really, Rolly Romero, and I know you don't as well. And yeah, I agree with your sentiments. I wouldn't mind seeing him getting chinned. But predictions, prediction time, Elliott. Before we finish up here, how does Ohara Davis versus Ismael Barroso go down on Saturday, January 6th? Who wins and how?
Oh, Paul, this is so harsh. You know what? I actually think Barroso's going to win this. I'm actually going to pick for Barroso, and the thing is, it's a tough one for me because I look at obviously Barroso's record. Obviously, there's been in a similar ways, some ways to kind of Ohara Davis's, and the fact that since had those fights against Akhmedov and Chaniev, he's went on the rebuild. But then I see the last time out against Romero where he still looked like he had a lot left, and obviously he's a guy that carries power. 22 KOs and 24 victories, obviously only 4 losses. I was there when he fought Kevin Mitchell. Obviously lost to Crawler as well. But I think for me, it's just I just think he's going to beat Ohara Davis. I think Ohara Davis for me is one of those guys that is not technically brilliant, but he's got a lot obviously power. He'll throw that jab out. He's durable, and he obviously carries power in that right hand as well. So for me, if he catches Barroso, maybe. But I'm actually leaning towards Barroso. I have to be perfectly honest. I'm going to go Barroso. And do I want to see Ohara Davis stopped? I don't want to see him stop. No, I mean he's only been stopped by Josh Taylor. So maybe Barroso gets him on the ground, but he sees the final bell and loses on points. But I think there'll be some knockdowns in this fight, to be perfectly honest with you. And I just think Barroso's going to come out on top.
Very interesting, mate. Very interesting. Well, to the delight of our viewers, and I'm sure they want to see this, we're starting 2024 off with a disagreement. I'm on team Two Tanks, team OD here. I think that Ismael Barroso, yeah, he's looked good. He looked good against Rolly Romero. to a certain extent, but he is 40, and I think he's got huge vulnerabilities to the body. And you look at Ohara Davis, and he's got freakishly long arms. It's one of them where, like, when he's standing there, you know, his glove's nearly touching his toe. When it's hanging there, like, he's got freakishly long arms. And I think if he uses those long levers, it's Barroso at range, mixes it up to head and body, I think he stops Barroso. I'm going to go for an Ohara Davis stoppage in the second half of the fight. That's my prediction. But yeah, mate, great to be back chatting with you. Videos, previews again. And 2024 going to be another massive year, hopefully, for boxing. But yeah, we're starting it all off with Ohara Davis against Ismael Barroso. And Elliott, I really appreciate your time as always, mate. And I'll speak to you again soon.
Much, Paul, and as always, guys, thank you very much for watching.